Great. Thank you, everyone, for waiting, and thank you for joining us for our webinar regarding optimizing data engineering and creating process efficiencies. We're happy you've joined us, and we hope that you find our conversation today really informative and interesting. My name is Ashley Scannell. I'm the Operations Manager here at Etleap, filling in today for Sunitha Mani. For the webinar today, we have Ben Fisher, Senior Director of Business Intelligence and Strategy at AXS, Aaron Franz, Senior Technology Alliance Manager at Looker, and Christian Roaming, Founder and CEO of Etleap. We really encourage everyone to ask questions, so please feel free to submit them in the chat section here in the GoToWebinar platform as they come to you, and we will try to get to as many as we can before the end of the hour. So from here, I'll let Christian take things over.
Thanks, Ashley. My name is Christian Roaming. I'm the founder and CEO of Etleap. I'm really excited to hear from Ben about ETL and analytics at AXS. And for context, I thought it would be useful to give you a brief introduction to Etleap and why we believe there is a need for a new approach to ETL. So traditionally, companies have deployed both applications and data warehouses on premises, and their ETL infrastructure has been on premises as well. But today, companies use tens or hundreds of cloud applications in addition to their on-premises applications. And at the same time, cloud services such as Amazon Redshift and Snowflake have made it easier to build highly performant data warehouses in the cloud. Now, you'd think that analytics would automatically get better as a result of these advancements, but as Ben will tell you here in a bit, there's a lot more to it. At my previous company, we had data in file stores, databases, and lots of different cloud services. And there was a lot of value in this data. And our team of analysts and scientists wanted access to all of it. And building a data warehouse ended up being very expensive because as CTO, I had to dedicate multiple engineers to it. And in spite of all that effort, the data warehouse turned into a maintenance headache. And neither the analytics team nor the dev team were particularly happy about that. Governance and data stewardship were big challenges as well because of the large number of disparate data sets and transformations that we implemented as part of our ETL process. So to try and address these challenges, we evaluated a bunch of different ETL tools. Couldn't really find one though that was well suited for the cloud, and that would also decrease our overall engineering effort. So, but on a more positive note, we knew that if we were able to avoid the galloping engineering costs and keep our pipelines under control, then there were these massive benefits, right? That could be reaped from basically faster access to more data. So we designed Etleap to basically help you do just that. Etleap is a cloud-native software as a service ETL solution for building data warehouses and lakes. It integrates out of the box with web services, databases, and file stores, as you can see here on the left. And on the data destination side here on the right, we integrate tightly with Amazon Redshift, Snowflake, and data lake technologies. Etleap's web UI lets developers and analysts set up connections and data pipelines in minutes, and our data wrangler and modeling tools make it possible to define transformations without scripting or coding. So that's Etleap, and with that, I will hand it over to Erin, who will give you an overview of Looker.
Thanks, Christian. So I'm just going to give an overview of some positioning on Looker as well as the product. So when we talk about Looker, Looker is a data platform that's really trying to address two problems caused by existing BI tools. So the first problem we call the data bottleneck. Many legacy BI tools enable organization-wide reporting, but they require a team of certified analysts to make any changes to reports. So as data consumers have new requirements and questions of the data, they're left waiting until the data team gets to the request. So by the time they get their answers, oftentimes their questions have changed or the data is stale. So in order to combat that problem, a new class of tools emerged, which we call workbook analytics tools. These tools allow the data consumer to slice and dice a subset of data quickly and create visualizations However, there are no real standards and governance to these reports. A definition of something as important as revenue could vary from one department to another, or even between different workbooks within the same department. So we call this lack of consistency and trust in the data chaos. So effectively, Looker seeks to take both the best of those tools while eliminating those problems. And Looker seeks to do that in the following key ways. If I can. So first, Looker is entirely in database. So instead of taking data out of databases, Looker is going to leverage the power and performance of these analytical data warehouses that are available today, like Redshift and Snowflake, connect directly and allow you to model all of that data within the database down to that row level, as well as that data is going to be as fresh as the data in the database. How this data becomes available is via Looker's modeling layer. Looker's modeling layer is called LookML. It's really an abstraction of SQL. So you're creating all of your business metrics, your table relationships, all the transformations you want to perform within that layer, which gets exposed to the end user in a click and drop interface from which anyone can create their own reports or consume reports that have already been created for them from that single source of truth. And then lastly, Looker is a modern application. It's a web application, which means you just access it via the browser, makes it really easy to share and collaborate. We also have a full API, so you can accomplish all the functionality of the application as well as more via our API. On the next slide, we'll just go through what an architecture looks like for Etleap and Looker. So, of course, you've centralized all your data in your data warehouse with Etleap. That could be data from, transactional databases, your SaaS applications, your web services, any file event streams into your centralized cloud data warehouse, whether that's Redshift or Snowflake. Looker can connect to that just via JDBC. What we've talked about so far, for the most part, is the web interface to Looker, which enables self-service exploration, visualization. Of course, you can export that data out of Looker, which is kind of that core BI piece. But in addition to that, you can also take all the visualizations, the functionality of Looker, and embed that in your own website or application. You can do that via iframe. You can do that via JavaScript, whatever makes sense. We also have advanced scheduling functionality, so you can take the data from Looker and schedule it where it needs to go, whether that's via email to file systems like S3 or via SFTP, or you can also use webhooks to initiate processes downstream. We also have an action hub, which is really an integration library where you can authenticate into third-party tools like Slack, Segment, and bring data from Looker directly to those products. And then finally, we also have that API, which I mentioned briefly. So you can really expose anything from Looker, any of the data, however you'd like in your own application, as well as do all the functionality of the application as well. And with that, I will pass it over to Ben.
Hi, everybody. Ben Fisher. As mentioned, I'm excited to talk to you all today. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges we were facing as we scaled up our data platform, our journey as we searched and looked at different products that could help us, and why we ended up making the choices that we did, and how that's worked out for us today. I'll start out by introducing myself. So I've been with AXS for a little over 7 years now. So since the very early days when I started, AXS was actually a 10-person startup. We've moved offices 4 or 5 times. It's probably a very familiar story for a lot of you on the call. I've worked on the ticketing team when I first started, moved to data product for a few years, really helping to build the foundation there of our data services, of all of our data offerings internally and for clients, and really trying to make sure that we were able to have everything in place to leverage our data and get the most out of it that we could. And as of a few months ago, we'll talk about this in a bit, but we now have a global data team, and I'm heading up the business intelligence and strategy division there. Before AXS, I spent 10 years with the Olympics. I worked in doing various roles. I always like a challenge, so I worked in IT for a bit, worked in QA for a little bit at the very beginning, and then a lot of roles in product for timing, scoring, and results. Let's see if I can figure out the transition here. There we go. So no surprise here. We use Etleap and Looker now to really amplify the impact of the data team. And that means really making sure that, with small teams like you typically have in startups, we're able to accomplish a lot more than you traditionally could with teams of this size. So let's talk a little bit about AXS. We're a ticketing company for live entertainment. You may or may not have heard of us. We're in several different markets in the US. We're also international, so we have a big office in London, and we've recently expanded to Japan. In the US, our clients include major properties such as the Staples Center in LA, the O2 in London, Red Rocks in Denver. We ticket the Houston Rockets and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So very disappointed from a couple of days ago, but we'll move on from there. We also have an office in Sweden as well, and we do a lot of ticketing there for the soccer league in Sweden. And just to give you a little bit of background on ticketing, you're probably familiar with marketplaces such as StubHub, Vivid Seats, Ticketmaster, etc. Ticketing really has two parts. So there's the primary ticketer, which would be like AXS or Ticketmaster. And then there's ticket aggregators or secondary marketplaces such as Vivid Seats, StubHub, so on and so forth. On the primary ticketing side, there are a lot of challenges that those kind of more prominent brands sometimes can avoid. If you look at, for example, the LA Lakers, they have a huge season ticket base. They're only selling a small percentage of their tickets on the web to the public. Most of that's going to individuals with whom they've had relationships for years. And we really, as the primary ticketers, have to make sure that we're giving them the tools to manage their inventory in the way that makes the most sense for their business, whether that's selling to consumers via the web or these long-term relationships or any other types of promotions or methods that they want to use. And that's really a key differentiator for us versus some of those other companies where they're able to really focus on the consumer, but they don't have to handle the challenges that the teams themselves or the ticketing property, the venue faces. The AXS Global team, as I mentioned, is really focused on making sure that we collect our data and we're able to leverage it properly, both internally and for clients. This includes data products or data-powered products, such as an email marketing platform that many of our clients use to reach out to their client base or their consumer base, internal reporting and analytics, pixel placement, so we can place pixels on the e-commerce funnel, so clients get direct real-time access to all the metrics coming from there, from the clickstream, and data services. So we provide data services internally and to clients as needed, depending on the client. And to talk a little bit about the clients, we, as you can imagine from the massive numbers of inventory that they have for their events, they want access to their data. They want to use the data to understand their inventory, understand their clients, and really drive their business forward. For many of our clients, ticketing is their biggest source of revenue, not for all, but for many. And their ticketing data is a big piece of that. So not only do we provide the ticketing application that lets them manage ticketing for an event, sell tickets and all of that, but we also provide them with data on the backside so they can inform their strategy moving forward. This includes access to their data in Redshift. We power integrations for them via flat files or APIs or direct integrations as well. And we've also got real-time integrations to power things like in-venue notifications and engagement. So that's us. Let's talk a little bit about how we built the platform in the beginning. As a small startup getting off the ground, this diagram here probably looks very familiar to many of you. So we have an extraction layer, transformation layer. A lot of that was custom ETL scripts, generally in Python, sometimes in Spark. We load the data into our data warehouse in Redshift. At the beginning, actually, we used different technology there, moved to Redshift a couple years ago. And that got it into a central place. From there, if we want to access the data internally, basically we'd hand over to the analytics department and they'd build reports, usually involving a lot of SQL. And if we wanted to build an integration, we would use our in-house built feed framework that would export flat files to S3 or SFTP, FTP, so on and so forth. And that was built in Python. And this whole thing was orchestrated by Airflow. So Apache Airflow has a big role in our infrastructure. And as an example, we'll walk through, let's say, MLS integration. So we work with a lot of Major League Soccer teams, and they have a very strong relationship with Major League Soccer itself. The MLS really wants to position the teams as well as they can for success. So MLS provides data to the teams as well as just kind of coordinating, as one of their roles. And so if we want to bring in data from Major League Soccer, we would, generally I would analyze their feed, kind of define the logic of bringing that in. Data engineering would write scripts in Python. We'd load that up. I'd take a look, make sure everything was okay. We QA it and everything. And then, great, we have that data available to us or to the teams, as the case may be. And then from there, if they want to access that, again, you have to say, okay, now we have to teach the analysts about the structure of this new data source, how that looks, what all the fields represent, and help them build reports from there, or build an integration into marketing. Let's say that this was going to power some sort of affinity scoring or something like that in marketing. Or if we wanted to send this data out, we would have to update our feed framework, just build a new feed essentially. And someone in the team, usually me or a data engineer, would define the SQL to power the feed. And again, everything, as you can see, very manual. But again, I think that's a pretty common approach across a lot of organizations. So what happened with this approach? It worked great to get us off the ground. Sorry, I'm trying to transition here. There we go. So this worked great to get us off the ground, but as I'm sure you guys are all aware, as you give stakeholders data, they just want more and more, right? So you bring in some data, you pat yourself on the back that you did a great job with this. They look at it and they're like, okay, this is great, but now I want this other thing, or how does this relate to something else? So immediately you start having to pull in more and more data, which in our case means a lot of ETL work. And as you saw with that list of integrations below, or with Major League Soccer, for example, a lot of that is, in our case, flat file integrations. And so we're trying to bring in all these kind of poorly defined data flows into the platform, having to wrestle with the data, understand it, map it kind of into our internal processes and internal models, and it turns into a lot. It kind of snowballs there. What ends up happening is, now you're an analyst, you've been waiting for this particular integration for a couple of weeks, you've got people asking you for a report that you can't provide. So at a certain point, you might start to bypass the data warehouse when you can, right? So if you have an option of, these are competent people, let's say they set up a SQL server somewhere, they start pulling in data there and satisfying some of the reporting from a different source than the data warehouse. And they're doing what they need to do their job, but at that point where we don't any longer have necessarily a central place with all the data. And at the same time, the analysts are building all the dashboards from scratch. So every time there's a new report, they need to build the SQL. Oh, I went too far. Sorry. They need to define the SQL, they need to build the visualizations themselves, and a lot of work, a lot of manual steps there. And again, they start to fall behind and they're not delivering what they want to deliver. So what you're left with is, the executives are frustrated, the clients are frustrated, the analysts are frustrated and bored because they're just doing all this SQL all the time. They don't feel like they have proper definitions. They're always doing discovery. They're always kind of doing the same things. And the engineers are always also frustrated and bored because they're, again, bringing in new files all the time that are probably poorly defined, trying to do the same scripts over and over again to convert, a date time into the right format. And for them, that's just frustrating. They'd much rather be doing other things. The other thing is it introduces sometimes a sense of failure because no matter how fast you go, you're not able to satisfy all the demands. And if you go too fast, you start introducing a lot of errors. If you go slow and try to do everything right, then you're definitely not satisfying the stakeholders. So either way, at the end of the day, the people at the other end, the people receiving the data, aren't happy and everyone's frustrated. So I think that's a big issue. It was a big issue for us, and I think it's a pretty common issue in the industry. So we started looking for a better data solution. So what problem were we trying to solve? At the core, what I mentioned a minute ago is that we're trying to improve the velocity of both engineering and analytics. We want to be a data-driven organization as well. But with the model that we had, everyone's getting frustrated, and the stakeholders also don't necessarily understand the challenges. They don't necessarily understand the data as well. And none of that really leads towards being data-driven as an organization. So we really wanted to start as much as possible removing the dependency on engineering for ETL scripts. We also wanted to, as much as possible, again, allow users to self-help with reporting. And that goes to building their own reports, distributing their own reports, so on and so forth, without having to contact kind of the business intelligence and strategy group all the time as they're getting access to the data. At the same time, I didn't mention this a minute ago, but when we started this search, we were in the middle of looking at a couple of big projects with GDPR in the UK, which is a lot of regulation around how you handle consumer data and what the consumers are able to request from you, and deleting that or redacting that if needed. And then we were also in the middle of moving our marketing execution platform. So we had just a ton going on, and we were looking at this model that was not sustainable for anybody. And so as we're looking at the products, keeping GDPR in mind and scalability, we really wanted to make sure that we were building things that were transparent, monitored, for example, and would respect security. So it wouldn't do us any good to sign a tool for ETL that immediately exposed all our data to the world, or the same with the reporting platform. So these were very important considerations as we move forward. And to the points on the right, we really wanted to move away from the model in which analysts are building a model for every single report, and would love to move to something where you build something once and now that's available for any report to use. So might sound way too in the weeds, but for us, there's a big difference between a free ticket, for example, and a ticket that was sold. And in the old reporting structure, you'd have to define the difference in every single report. So every time you have a metric for a free ticket, you'd have to copy the SQL in there and apply that on each visualization. We really wanted to get away from that. That just doesn't scale. So we were encouraged as we went into this search because it's not that uncommon now to look to outsource some of these kinds of tasks. I mean, Christian and Aaron touched on this. People have been doing it for a few years now. Some of the products are starting to get to be mature, and there's a few good answers out there for both ETL and reporting. And for us, Etleap and Looker really stood out in a few ways. So as we were going through different providers, one thing we went through a lot on the ETL side, we'll start with Etleap and the data loading, is that a lot of these products out there really focus on replication. They don't actually do do transformation. And I remember going through the search, and I kind of realized that, as we were trialing different products, you're getting the data from the source, you're loading it into your data warehouse just fine, but now you still have the piece of actually making that data usable in the data warehouse. And I remember, kind of Googling it and talking to different people, and you can even see quotes on the internet from various CEOs saying, our tool is really a replication tool, it's not really a transformation tool. And a lot of the products are actually pretty opposed to handling the transformation because it is a difficult step. But from our perspective, if you need to do the transformation once the data is in the data warehouse, then you still need engineering, right? So you still have that dependency. So we can, to go back to the initial example, if we want to bring in a new feed and we have a tool that will grab the data from an FTP or wherever we're getting it from and load it into the data warehouse, but then the analyst can't actually tie that to anything, or the dates are poorly formatted, it's just creating a headache for the people downstream. So it's great to have that first step handled, but we really wanted to have both pieces handled so that we're able to get a lot of these data sources into the data warehouse in a way that's immediately usable by whoever's accessing it. The second thing that we found with some of the tools that actually did provide transformations was it's a very complicated interface. And sometimes, I remember in one case, and this was a couple of years ago, we had to scale up and down servers and things like that, and really define these pipelines end to end with a lot of different components, which really is more than we were looking for the analyst to do. It's introducing a lot of complexity there, and I'm sure that it works for a lot of organizations, but it was a little bit of a stretch for us. And one other thing I meant to mention is that, the early days of AXS, we're a startup. We're not really looking for some of these enterprise tools that may advertise that they can do everything end to end and everything looks great, but take years to actually implement, or sometimes take years to implement and then don't actually solve the problem you're trying to solve. So we're really looking for something that's nimble, something that's pretty straightforward to implement, and will make an immediate impact on the team. And Etleap really did that, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Well, let's talk about it now. So Etleap, for us, what made Etleap stand out for us were three things. So the focus on transformation, which, as I mentioned, is huge for us. So Etleap has a data wrangler. So if you're, especially with flat file integrations, you point to the FTP, you use a regular expression to define the file name, you pull it in, and you immediately can wrangle the data. And that includes a whole lot of powerful functionality there with transforming dates or splitting fields or renaming the field names, defining the sort key, distribution key, things like that, that really lend itself to providing an end result that's a table that's properly formatted and properly built to be used downstream. Etleap also had a very open and transparent team. So I remember talking with different providers, and a lot of them were selling a lot. But there's some things, someone who's worked in data for a few years, some things that probably aren't true or maybe more challenging than what they're letting on. Etleap was very open about their challenges and what the platform could and could not do. I felt like that's really valuable because if they're open from the beginning, then I have confidence that they will be open as we address some of those challenges moving forward, rather than potentially sweeping them under the rug. The other thing was the intuitive design. So as I mentioned, some of these, there are enterprise tools out there that can do some of these things, but they take a long time to implement, take a long time to get people using the product. With Etleap, it was very intuitive. So we've had myself, the analytics team, using the platform for a year now. We've also onboarded new people with very little training. They're able to actually transform and bring in new data sources themselves, which is really important for us. It really helps us to, like I said earlier, amplify the impact of that team and make it and help them to do their jobs better. So on to Looker. when it came to the reporting or the business intelligence platform, we looked at, again, several different providers, and we ran into a couple of different approaches. Some of the platforms would actually pull the data into the reporting platform. And at that point, maybe you can do fantastic visualizations there, but at that point, the effort you've put into modeling the data or defining things in the reporting platform are kind of lost because they're locked into that platform and they can't be used outside of the platform. Looker provides a consistent data modeling layer, which can be used for a lot of things inside of reporting, obviously, but also lets you build, for example, persistent derived tables, so essentially materialized views that can be leveraged by all sorts of products outside of the reporting framework itself, which is great. We also ran into a pretty normal approach, which was a lot of customization for each visualization or each dashboard report. So that includes having analysts define SQL, having kind of front-end engineers in some cases write HTML or other code to kind of beautify the front end. And this really would turn into a high-touch platform, which is not what we're trying to do. So from our perspective, we're trying to really let the analysts build the modeling layer and then let users at AXS self-help themselves to reporting and build their own dashboards. And in doing so, a big part of our goal there is to let to get the stakeholders at AXS more involved and more deeply engaged into the data itself. So it's one thing if you're a stakeholder to be standing back and waiting for business intelligence to deliver you a report. And then when that report is delivered, usually you're going to find some problems with it because you know things that the analyst who built the report maybe doesn't know. And for us, if we can get the stakeholders to start building the reports themselves, or at least start engaging in that process more, we can cross-pollinate in a way to our team and have our team understand the business that much better as we understand the challenges that the stakeholders run into as they build these reports. Looker also had, so that's really our goal: get the stakeholders to have skin in the game, get analysts out of the day-to-day of building reports, and let people at AXS actually pull their own reports and drill into the data themselves. So Looker really hit all of those. And to be honest, I remember going to a Looker join meeting a year ago in Denver. I'm based in Denver. And it really was eye-opening for me because it was the first platform that really looked at itself as providing that data layer or that modeling layer rather than just a reporting platform. So for us, that was really a no-brainer. The data modeling layer is excellent. It lets us do all the things that we want to do with our reporting. It has very intuitive querying and reporting for staff with the Explorer, which is really defined by us. So my team builds that layer that the stakeholders interface with. And so we can define that to look in a way that works for our company. And the other thing that stood out with Looker is that they have outstanding training and support. Really quick turnaround times for questions, very positive always. And that's really important to us as we're building this team, this global data team, and really introducing a new dynamic to AXS where stakeholders are expected to kind of drill into the data themselves. Having a partner who is able to engage with us in a positive way is a really key piece of making that successful. Let's see. So this just really encapsulates what we're talking about here. The Looker's data modeling layer really allows analysts to build the models once, makes their focus move away from the mundane day-to-day defining SQL and beautifying reports to more impactful things like defining, better dimensional models or integrating new data sources, things like that, that actually drive us forward in a much more scalable way and allow us to move forward much more quickly than we could have before. So I went too far again, way too far. We're almost done, as you can see. So if anybody's bored yet. So this is the platform that we have today, now that we have Etleap and Looker. So as you can imagine, the old platform where we had everything going through custom ETL built on Python and going out through all of that. We still have, as I think would be expected, we still have some things that are custom integrations, internal integrations or other sources, depending on the need. We have Etleap in place for a lot of the standard transforms and some of the modeling there. We have Looker as well, and then we have clients helping themselves or stakeholders helping themselves on the Looker side. So let me talk a little bit about how this, a couple of quick examples of how this has helped us over the past 6 months. One really easy example on the Looker side is the rodeo. So there's a Houston Livestock Show, and rodeo is a big client of ours. Every year they put on something like 21 concerts in a row on consecutive days. And we put a lot of effort into that particular event. The team managing that event was able to build their own reports for the event. And there's actually a lot of, I won't go into the details because it might not be applicable to you, but there's a lot of kind of strange things about that particular event, which tends to happen with these big events. So if you have a big event, you want things done in a certain way that makes sense to you, may not make sense to other people, but you want it done that way and it works, right? So that's what you need to do to pull off your event. So our account management team and the sales team was actually able to build their own reports that were custom for that event and have that mailing out every morning to various stakeholders at the event, and have people within the team checking Looker every day to look at all the key metrics around the events, both for primary sales, for resale market, for demand, all sorts of things related to the event. So that was huge for us, because a year ago, that would have been something that we probably would have tried to build internally in my team, and then potentially not met expectations, just because of the volume of things going on, and also, as I mentioned, the custom needs of that particular client. Another example which incorporates both Etleap and Looker is the UK. So, we have, as I mentioned, a big footprint in London. They actually run the Sweden business as well from there. So we have a small team in the UK, in the London office, that manage the data warehouse and everything for the UK as far as the business intelligence side goes. So the engineering team at AXS still powers everything into the data warehouse, builds feeds as needed. So all kind of the custom ETL piece here that you can see, the products and data services and the feed framework. But the UK team was able to self-help with all of their integrations into the email marketing platform that they use, for example, Adobe. That includes loading the data in, building kind of a consent framework to track which consumers are opted into marketing or out, or which type of marketing they're opted in for, and manage all of that, which is, as you can imagine, a really big process. And that's all done in Etleap today. So that was completely done outside of engineering. And again, that's another example of a project that we may not have been able to handle so elegantly or so timely without these tools. So we'll talk a little bit about the positive impacts for the AXS team. I think I've covered this pretty much as we've gone, but now both engineering and analysts really spend less time on manual tasks. They're able to focus on the bigger initiatives. From a stakeholder perspective or a leadership perspective at AXS, if you're an account manager, who's working on the relationship with a big client, or an executive at AXS, you don't any longer have to ask an analyst for some information. wait 3 days or a month, as the case may be, for an answer and then get it, you can help yourself. And a lot of people are doing that now. The adoption has been really good. Business intelligence strategy. So my team is really focused on defining models now and scaling out the platform. And yeah, as I mentioned, the stakeholders can easily find, 90% of the time they can easily find what they're looking for. And we really reduce the impact of ad hoc requests coming into the team and all the disruption that can cause. So just as a takeaway, there you have it on the right. But with Etleap and Looker, the AXS Global Data team is able to focus on the high value tasks that drive AXS and our clients' business forward, while still serving the needs from a reporting and modeling and everything else that goes on in there. So that's the end of my presentation. I think we're on to Q&A now.
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate that. And thank you all for listening. And thanks as well to, again, Ben, Aaron, and Christian for your insights. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. So attendees that are still on, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to include them in the chat section of the platform, and we'll get to them right now. So the first question is for Ben at AXS. They ask, how long did it take AXS to get live with both Etleap and Looker?
Down to the details already. So with Etleap, it's really straightforward. I mean, it was as soon as we had the keys, we had a trial version, and you could almost say that we were live in the trial version because we have constant requests from clients for new integrations. We used Etleap to satisfy a couple of those once we were satisfied that we were probably moving forward with the tool. And really right off the bat, we were moving a lot of those, the integrations that were in our backlog, had been requested for some time onto Etleap and getting those turned around pretty quickly. Yeah, officially a couple weeks, maybe.
Great.
And Looker, similar story with Looker. So we trialed a couple of different platforms, and as we were trialing Looker, we built up, an initial modeling layer. We did end up kind of destroying that layer and taking a second swing at that. So I would say it probably took 2 to 4 weeks to have some reporting on Looker that was being used within the organization broadly. But we were straight from the bat working with stakeholders and certain account managers to build things, make sure that that we're satisfying the needs, and get their feedback as we're building things out.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Christian at Etleap. They ask, what integrations does Etleap work with?
Great, so we at Etleap, we integrate with any data source that our customers want to, or that our customers works with. They can be on premises or in the cloud. Often we're dealing with sources that are, file servers, things like that are behind firewalls or on VPNs. That's something we just do out of the box. And sources can be structured like databases, or semi-structured like Ben was talking about with files, event streams, that sort of thing. So there are over 50 source technologies that are supported out of the box. And something that's unique about Etleap is that we can also build out support for news sources on demand with turnaround time of just a few weeks. So yeah, our goal is really for customers to integrate all of their disparate data sources into their data warehouse.
Great, thank you. Well, if no one has any further questions, that would conclude the questions for today. So thank you guys, everyone, again for your time today. If you have any other questions that you're thinking of after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to Christian or Aaron at Looker and Etleap. You can see their emails are listed there. So please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions or would like a demo, or if there's anything that we can help you with. We're here to help. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys again for joining us, and yeah, thank you. Have a great day.